Perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
here we're going to talk about the graduate school union. And basically, I'm trying to get folks' perspective on really the failure of this. It was a terrific program, incredible ideas, you know them better than I, but like how come it didn't make it? And everybody has a point of view about that. And I've got mine, and you've got yours, and the thought of it is I want to put up that, mosaic of perspectives, and that will give other people, a chance to add their own, because they don't have to do it in video, but they can do it in, there'll be places to write stuff on if you want to do it, or upload stuff to it, but I'm trying to, it's a big people if I can connect with everybody. And, I was going to build a social network into the website itself. That's a big mistake. I'm going to use Facebook or somewhere they have it all there, and you can do a lot more than I want to do. And that lets me keep the UGS website archival in nature, so that I can put up all the materials. I put up every North Central report, every secret report, the Fisher report, everything's up there, all the good and all the bad. And then I'm writing my own little story that so I can link that stuff together if you want to see what the North Central had to say. Well, here's all the reports, and there's a lot there. And you get to go and rummage around and for yourself. That way, I'm not leading people, I'm just showing people what's what and where's where. And I put in the learner handbooks, especially the ones that were the fullest. I put the first one up. I have the first original UGS thing that Roy and Goodwin did. And I put up like the letter from Carl Rogers to me about why he sent people there. So it's not bad. It's not all bad. There's some bad stuff here. It's not all bad. So I just thought, well, if I can talk to folks and get their idea on the union. You spent years with the institution in many capacities, from UWW, getting the degree, being on the faculty, revamping the learning process, because we did that on that trip in California, which was a great idea. And, this empowerment of the learner is what I think, if there's any focus of that program that I try to bring to it, because it did place the learner in a different relationship to their own education. And I always think that we as a faculty never got our mentoring role clear. I mean, I interviewed Merv for about 4 or 5 hours on tape. And he was very good about it, in the sense that I could ask him all the things I needed to, about why did you do this? And he puts a lot of it on Judith, which I think is, but he did work with Conley all those years. And he calls it a frozen experiment, is his way of describing the graduate school. So, well, that's an interesting idea. And that, that comes from Reisman, I think, is his framework from when he was at Harvard doing those studies with all the first experimental colleges. And, I was thinking about it the other day in terms of Black Mountain was a college, terrific college that failed. And the literature about Black Mountain that I've read, at least, it focuses on their accomplishments, not on why it fell apart, And I'm not focusing on the graduate school accomplishments, and I want to know why did this, experiment and with so much promise really fall apart. And that's what I want to get a perspective of folks' views on, who'll be willing to talk to me while I do it.
Okay. Got lots of ideas about that, but they're really only speculations, right? Informed speculations. I think it's kind of a lot of channels go into
Yes.
what caused it to fail. For me, rather than frozen experiment, I think it was an incomplete experiment. And maybe frozen is a good word in the sense that I think it closed its mind to experimentation way too soon.
Correct.
And so let me try and do it in layers. There were two competing goals. One was building an institution. The other was changing American higher education. And those were really antagonistic goals. And because it wasn't clear which one was operating, but both were always trying to operate, that they had to self-destruct. Then on the institution building side, for the most part, the leadership after John and you was institution building, not changing
No,
American
not
higher education.
program development
No.
or
No.
right.
And so once it got into the track of institution building, its financial base was critical, its growth trajectory was critical, and those were much more important to the institution than the contribution to higher education. But in that mode, the people that were chosen to be the leaders, the presidents, successive presidents, were uniquely underprepared for the politics of higher education. They had no idea how to build an institution. They were operating out of very limited experience, no understanding of this model, no understanding of what its challenge to higher education was. It was trying to find a place in the existing spectrum of organizations. And that's all they were interested in. They never really got it. The people that were interested in making a difference in higher education, I think, lost their steam. Now, after John, when you and John left leadership roles, there wasn't a leader that you could look to share that vision. Even if there were disagreements between us at any point, basically we shared the vision. We knew there was something valuable here. But with the institution builders, there was no sharing the vision. It was a question of just trying to keep your own little turf clean enough to do the job right, but not to really, you gave up on the institution and tried to have your own mini institution. And that's destructive of any kind of growth. And then a third track, I think, is that those of us that wanted to change higher education, how to put it, we didn't really, as a group, carry forward a coherent agenda. So we talked about putting the student in the role of responsibility, the chairing the process. We talked about the student's interest driving the agenda. We didn't talk very well about the responsibility to the disciplines that they were in. We didn't talk about responsibility to the discourse of scholarship. We didn't sort of add accountability to responsibility, except in the quality of the degree, the PDE.
Right.
But the actual process was not well monitored.
No. Right.
And the PDE, as a result, often, 40% of the time, 50 to 40% of the time, took a lot of editorial involvement from faculty,
Yes.
rather than pedagogical involvement.
True.
So that process became corrupting of a good teacher-learner relationship. Teacher-learner being on both sides of that. And then the politics of changing higher education. We missed so many boats. I mean, for example, the UWW model, which was to actually latch on to higher education institutions. UGS could have done that too. We could have brought the model to higher education, and for a period of time, been a kind of leech on the structure, and began to change it. We didn't do that. We could have built our own professional journal. Talked about the discipline we were trying to bring to higher education. We didn't do that. So the faculty that were committed to that agenda didn't think about how to use the opportunity of the UGS platform to move that agenda. We simply defended our position against an administration that was doing institution building.
Right. Exactly right.
Right, and we lost, and the first battle we lost was growth. I mean, in a sense, the strength of the Carl Rogers years was you had people coming into UGS who were overqualified for a PhD.
Right.
Right? They had succeeded dramatically in their careers. They wanted the PhD for all kinds of reasons. And a few years of just that would have built a legitimacy for the program that could have been used to really influence a lot of things. But by diluting that with broad admissions, with a faculty that was used to the former kind of student, switching to students who needed a lot of help, the whole thing began to erode because you had to, as a responsible faculty member, you had to take on students who all do it in the program. And there was no accountability at the top. Once someone was in, they were going to get out.
Right.
So you had to help them get out with this higher quality of work that they could manage. So that was undermining. So I think there were lots of layers of misjudgment that led to corollary undermining of commitment. So the way I see it was it ended up with the institution builders at one end, and faculty members creating the mini university, doing their own thing with a small group of students. You know, they would earmark who they were going to work with before a colloquium. They would solidify at the colloquium and have their own little group. And I had my group in New York, and I did the research seminar with me. So I literally had my own little institution. And I didn't any longer try to take on the institution, except when it invaded what I was trying to do. So you had many institutions and this institution building agenda with all the problems that dichotomy produced.
I always felt that one of the great losses was in the consortium, because that was the way to influence higher education. And the crack in that consortium came when they began to admit people to the consortium that weren't institutions, like the Ohio School of Practical Politics.
Right.
I mean, not that they weren't nice people, but where were they going to, we didn't need them for recruitment, we didn't need them, much more to do a flaming rainbow, UWW flaming rainbow, which also crashed and burned.
Right.
But the consortium, I thought, was the institution building side of the union.
Right.
And when they dropped that in '78 in New Orleans, I argued against that at that meeting. I couldn't understand, and so I think that the institution building, decision had to be made right around there. And that led to getting a Conley, who was nothing but, and robbed the program, I would say, to build the institution, which is now supporting the remnants of it by selling the buildings, and they're renting, one of them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you had incompetence, and then you had that's not fair incompetence, but the underpreparedness. Ken Rothy was underprepared for the job.
Yes. Deeply
underprepared.
Yeah.
And then you went from him. I think he tried to understand the program.
Yes, he did. He came in with provost from Colin Greer.
Yeah.
So he'd been a standard academic person.
Yeah, he tried, and he actually.
And he was interested. He did.
But Conley wasn't interested.
No.
He saw an opportunity to build something new in higher education.
Right.
That freestanding, that had a good fiscal model that would work.
That would have his name on it.
Yeah.
I think that's.
And that led to all the problems of financing and the growth trajectory.
I think it was this year or last year that UWW Minnesota finally left. But when a huge institution keeps an idea like that alive for what it represents in terms of, not for the enrollment, which was, they could enroll them anywhere they want in that institution, but for the model, and the opportunity that it presented, to have lost that. I never understood that. I never understood why the consortium wasn't something that people fought for a lot more.
No, for the short while that social policy was in the consortium, it provided the 20 board members of social policy were distinguished academics.
Yes, they were.
So it provided, and that was another area where I think we fell flat, that the adjunct professors was all way too ad hoc. Way
too ad hoc. They weren't interested. They were more interested in the individual, not the model.
Right.
And yet
right.
we didn't have time to reorient an academic to the model.
So what a consortium member could do, like social is bring you in 20 academics who got it and were willing to work with people.
Yeah,
If Green Chimneys, for example, had a different relationship, it's not without the details of that, but its faculty was regarded as, at that point, the best in the world around animal therapy with violent kids. So that's another, it was a specialized faculty that could have become a piece of the consortial
right.
adjunct faculty. But it was, the consortium wasn't used in that way.
No. And I've asked people about it, and maybe Jim Dixon's the only guy that could, because he was there, he became the president, in that interim, and that's the only guy I know that would have a perspective on why.
Right.
I can't get it out of Pruitt, you know what I mean? He was around all that, but, he was protecting his own, and I just feel using the ideas where he wanted to.
Jim and John had the drive to make, and they were iconoclastic. They came out of a tradition, really
Right.
not accepting that the way it was and the way it needed to be. And they also had a political agenda, which there were people who were getting degrees that were being held up
Because
for
of it.
making a contribution because of it. And that was an important conception. But King Cheek didn't have it.
No.
So from King on, it became a bureaucracy. It was as provost, your effort to oversee the Washington office was one level of incompetence after another. So once we're on the growth track, rather than seeing those satellite programs as opportunities that might not live forever, but to spark something in a place that need to happen.
Make alliances, recruit.
Right. They became institutional in the sense that it had to live forever. That's why I meant it was an incomplete experiment, because it was treating its model as though it was fully formed, rather than it had to keep evolving.
Yeah, right.
Because we were just learning really in the 80s what it meant what do we mean by a student chairing a committee?
Right-o.
We didn't mean turning over all academic standards system.
No.
But it was all very vague.
Yeah, I remember we went through the, what is it, you could, veto power.
Yeah.
At the chair. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was dumb.
I mean, that's not anywhere in academia like that.
Right.
I mean,
And
even
it
the Board of
served-
Regents, they got to vote on it, then they
Yeah.
veto something, but it's not there.
Right, it didn't serve a useful function.
It didn't serve a useful function. Yeah. And I was always worried about the growth, and I tried to stop the growth, it stopped itself. But it's like when we got to such a point where the faculty got very dispersed. I mean, who were we hiring, and what were their roles going to be? And we started hiring our own graduates, which I never understood. I mean, that's a sign that you're not. We had too many, one or two exceptions because they'd be exceptional people,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the case. It was convenience more than exceptional
It was convenient.
contributions
And
for
there was no
folks.
orientation of faculty.
No.
So they sort of had to catch up as they went along.
Right.
We had talked about an idea years ago. I think it began with you, John, and me. But the idea that we would actually try to create a fellowship program at the union for new PhD students, new graduates from distinguished universities as a pedagogical year of study.
Right.
And then we'd start to build an adjunct base
Right.
that
That wouldn't
was
be
well
so-
trained in their discipline and
Right,
trained in
and understand this model.
Right.
I think, the folks were good in their disciplines maybe because they'd gone up the tenure ranks and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But then they come face to face with this model and they kind of get their hands around it, but the time in the program was so short that most of those folks, when I would go to those meetings, and you too, the certification and pre-graduation meetings, it was a lot of time spent explaining, justifying the model, and that just meant nobody done it.
Right.
If you show up and they don't know what are we going to be doing here, nobody had any kind of clue.
Right, but that was also true for faculty as well as adjunct faculty.
It's true.
Right?
Absolutely.
So the faculty meetings, you would hear people talking about a program that you wouldn't recognize.
Right.
And then the drive, as it got bigger, the drive to have faculty members, I mean, the very part-time people
Yeah,
had to get students in order to be able to be paid.
right,
So they would, basically, their learning curve was complicated by having too many people to learn
Too soon.
from too soon.
yes. Right. And the part-time faculty, I never saw the institution work out that balance where the institution got its fair share and whoever, the other part-time got their fair share. You know, when there was suffering to be done, it was done on the institutional side, it seems to me, especially the people in therapy with their full loads and,
Well, that deal was.
that was bad,
awful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And all the problems that we had with the psychoanalytic institutes here in Philadelphia, I mean, there was the problem exaggerated because there's so much, therapeutic time in those programs that there's very little left over for academic time,
Plus, they use their advisors in
Right.
multiple roles.
Yes,
So you'd have your analyst who was also your core faculty member, and we didn't.
we didn't stop that, no. We should have said, if you're the analyst for this, you gotta have,
Right.
it would have been easy.
Yeah.
Would have been
Well,
easy.
John originally tried to negotiate. I remember that negotiation that the core faculty had to be from the union, not from the analytic institute.
Right.
But they wouldn't do that deal.
No. No, and it was different with the humanistic psychology program that Clayton Starkus
Yeah.
had, because he was shopping for an affiliate, right?
Right.
And he left he was with Saybrook, HBI at the time it was called,
Yeah.
and, came into the union, but he brought his, he had his faculty, Bruce and Sarita,
Yeah, they were good.
and Joe Deloach. That was the faculty that he brought with him, and he brought a student base, and they had a focus, they knew what they were doing,
Yeah.
Not trying to change American higher education, but trying to change the way people were educated in that humanistic model,
Yeah, right.
which was fine. I
That's
thought,
right.
I was, in all those discussions,
Yeah.
and that made sense to me. The psychoanalytic crowd never made sense. We're getting way off base here.
Yeah. The Rogers students were good.
Yeah, he was an early adopter. we call
Yeah,
him.
they really got it, and it was very compatible with the way they were being trained too.
Yes, and they were ABD. They were people who left their PhD program somewhere to go and work in that center for the study of the person. He needed them to get that. I mean, and like you say, if we'd have stuck with that model longer, because we had a lot of ABDs when I showed up, and it made sense because they had a lot of their work done. But when we took people fresh out of, whatever, not even with master's degrees, some not even with,
I know.
that's a lot. I mean, to take that on,
Yeah, there were no
we-
resources to help.
we didn't have the resources or the know-how.
Right.
If we'd had $1 million, we still wouldn't know how to take a guy from, a baccalaureate to a PhD.
And often, well, not often, but later on, often a bad baccalaureate.
Yes,
Poor training.
poor training for any,
Yeah.
right, exactly. So it was, it's,
Yeah.
and I just think if that balance between, which I like the way you put it, so changing higher education and, developing this experimental, if we had kept that balance in there, it would have helped us say who we're actually going to serve. We got very ambivalent about that to make the numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on that admissions committee for years, and I saw my main job as a gatekeeper to keep out really unqualified people. And I'm not happy about everybody we let in, but I am happy about a lot of people that didn't get in because they would have.
Well, we also used to have the rule that you weren't really fully in until after the club.
Yeah, that was a good rule.
But they
Never implemented.
No, you come at the end of the club, you send a note saying they're fine, but there's this one or two
Yeah.
that I'm worried about, and there'd be no follow-up.
Right. We had the one guy in the colloquium who had wanted to do the work on women's breasts or something. Was the strangest thing I ever, and he lived here in New York. And I was coming through, and I met with the guy. And I just said, we can't do a PhD like that. I mean, we had a very heated discussion about that, but, I went back and said, we cannot do this. And they didn't, continue that fellow, but, that was so off.
Yeah.
There were a lot of folks like that, inappropriate,
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but it was inappropriate for any kind of work we wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it got too big. It got too undisciplined. There wasn't any, the faculty meetings we never really did any work. You know, I read the faculty, I put all the faculty minutes up there. Why not? This is what we did, you know, and it's pathetic.
Did you put the voter no confidence in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all there. 13 people supported me. Oh,
It was a meeting before that, I think, was the one where I took Fontaine on.
yeah,
And then, so Bob had said to me at one point, because I hadn't come to a couple of meetings, and he said, you know,
oh yeah, I remember that.
we need you to come to meetings, we need the senior people to be here. After that meeting, he took me aside and said, we don't need you to be a meeting.
Thanks a lot for coming, don't come. No.
He tried, you know, in his own, in his institution building mode, he was a traditional kind of second level, third level college president
Right,
from Seton Hall, and he was trying to do what he knew how to do,
right.
but it was not what the institution needed.
No, like he ran the graduate program, remember, for 18 months as dean and president. And that gave him a better understanding, I think, of the model than anybody that followed him, because they, you know, dusted it off. They didn't care about the, you know, model much. I mean, Cadwallader took over after he died. He wasn't in very long. Then they got Judith. Then they get this guy. These people have never paid any attention. You know, they came in with their own ideas, put their things, you know, revamped the program, and you know, they're on the web. They don't. They won't sell. They can't. That program will not fly. It's expensive and time-consuming and no support.
I don't know whether this is appropriate for you, but what's the status now? Are there, what, 50 students, 100 students?
Well, there are probably less than a couple hundred, but 150 of them would be people finishing up still, or 100. And then in the new program, you know, they've sold it to about 50 people. But that can't support the structure. So they sell the buildings, rent one back. They sold both of them, the one across the street and the Conley thing. They rent one back, so they've got a little money reserved from that, but that's also, you know, going down.
Sure.
I mean, this, they still have a hefty outlay of keeping all these undergraduate programs together, and they're very constant. You know, I don't see any growth. They have a particular, they're all, the undergraduate out west at least, they get to like the police officers or the, you know, the whatever cohort group they can put together to do undergraduate degrees for. Now, I don't know if that works or not, but it's probably, you know, useful at some level for those folks. But the doctoral program, the new hires that they have, new PhDs, how do they know how to run? If you don't have the experience of, you know, you can't do it as a new PhD.
And if you don't have a pedagogical model that's either clear to you or forming in an experimental way, you don't need another PhD program.
Right.
Right?
No, there's plenty of places
Yeah.
to get a PhD. No. Yeah, it's, I don't know where the interventions could have come, you know, maybe earlier by the Board of Regents. They were put off for years by Bob from making visits.
Right.
Because they would have, you know, it was so late by the time their reports were so devastating. And there was no way to revamp it to meet their expectations. And then when they sent, you know, Moffo in to run the school, basically, he became the graduate dean, proved all that stuff. And as an outside guy from Virginia, what, Tech or something, is really totally out of sync with what it was hopeless. It was hopeless by then. Just too little, too late.
Yeah. It's a pity because there was a point where you could honestly say, I remember one of the site visits, one of the accreditation visits, the guy from the University of Chicago School of Education, and he chaired the School of Education, or dean, and he was the chair of the site committee.
Uh-huh.
And we were chatting, and he said to me that his judgment was that probably a third of union student products, PDs, were better than most high-level theses. About a third were equivalent to the average PhD thesis, which is not spectacular,
But adequate.
adequate. About a third were below level.
That's what we found on quality assurance. 25% should not have made it through, is what, when I chaired that committee the first time.
So that's what he said, but he said, he said, the truth is, it was very interesting, he said, the truth is when we've admitted a student to the PhD track, we're not going to let them fail. So the ordinary, the okay ones are generally the product of, very often the product of a faculty member and a student making it work. And I was, well, it's just really telling us something here. You know, we can improve the bottom if we had a different kind of faculty relationship.
Right, right. No, I think that's true. You know, now they let people in who theoretically can do it, but still it's hard.
They make mistakes.
In a big institution, you know.
And it's less true now because testing ahead of time for a PhD program now is absurd.
Yeah.
You can't get into one.
Can't get in on high
Yeah.
GRE scores.
Yeah, right. But then, well, you could find a PhD program if you wanted one.
Oh yeah. Without doing that.
Yeah, doing any of that stuff. The new school you could get into, University of Massachusetts, they were decent programs, but they had more. Their idea was you admitted people at the front end, but you made it hard for them to get out. Not that they wouldn't get out, but you made it difficult for them to get out. They had to really work hard, and you put the faculty investment into that.
Right. Yeah. And I also thought that, you know, I put in all the HBCU, all those initiatives that were, attempts, mainly in enrollment building. Those were not attempts to revamp the model or update it in any way that I could see,
Yeah, those were really incorrigible.
Yeah.
I mean, they really played kind of a social card, sometimes race, sometimes not, but a social card that meant you couldn't really impose standards. Yeah.
Right, if you're going to go out and recruit among the black colleges, nice folks and all the rest, but, they took anybody, and it was sort of like, wait a minute, we never had any way to distinguish who would work in this model and who wouldn't, because it wasn't for everybody.
No, it was the same with the psychoanalysts. It was that we'll determine what the standards are because we know this field. If you're historically black colleges, we know our client base. We know
Right.
this. We don't need you to tell us. If you tell us, then you're offending some kind of social mores. So it was the same thing really. It was race, the other was psychoanalytic knowledge, but there was no institutional point of view about what the relationship should be. So we got sort of frightened. We didn't want to be imperial.
Right.
Right. On the other hand, we gave up institutionally on what we knew to be adequate standards.
Yes.
I remember I had two people who people I worked with, and I recommended that they not be graduating, that they refused to do any more work on their theses, their PDs, and I knew they were not adequate, and I recommended they not be graduating. They both were.
Yeah, that was one of our big, the leadership, deans on up, didn't work. Whatever their agenda was, I don't know. But it didn't matter who we got. We had all kinds of people in those lead positions.
Yeah, man, Elizabeth would have expected.
Yeah. And it may have made some difference if she'd gotten the job, she wanted it, but they weren't prepared, she would have kind of put some self-correcting dimensions to the process and understood it at least.
I mean, as president.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least she had the ear of the university world.
Yes.
She was a respected
That would have been a
figure.
very good move, I
Very
thought.
good, yeah.
I wrote a good letter for her, but that they weren't going to appoint her no matter what anybody said, so. It's just, I've gotten hold of some board minutes, put them up, anything I get a hold of, because let's see how all the pieces work, or didn't, and what are they talking about, and how are they spending their hours together, it's like, it's all there, really, you can't make this stuff up, it's all in the written record.
It's a pity.
It's a pity. Yeah, it breaks my heart You know, now I've got enough distance on it. You know, and because when I was in it, you know, it was overwhelming. I mean, it just was overwhelming. I was way over my head probably, but such promise, such a beautiful thing, and it just was. It didn't have a chance with the faculty and the leadership and the students that got chosen to
Right.
pursue this.
Right.
It was an impossible task.
Right, and the mixed agenda, what the whole thing was about.
Right.
What were we really trying to do with this? Well, we never had a meeting, really. There was never really a faculty meeting.
No,
About mission.
no. It was about reports.
Yeah.
Boring reports that people could have got on paper,
Yeah.
you know, to bring us together and always keep us in a group. There never any work groups. You know, it was one big group because nobody trusted anybody to be out of the room
Right.
in case anything happened. So there was never that kind of, you know, institution building among the faculty. We were
Right.
much to blame as anybody, I think, in
Right.
terms of
No, I think so. Because either a faculty-led or an administration-led formative evaluation process should have been constant.
Yep.
Should have been talking to faculty.
Never had anybody come in from the outside
No.
to take a look at us.
No.
After I bought Paul Heistin, I brought him in from Berkeley to look at the PDs, you know. I thought, well, that's a sensible thing. He was great. He gave us a great report. He gave us the same thing. Some of them are pretty terrific and some of them are not. And we got the same problem and, you know, what are you going to do to work it on it? How are you going to stop these from being bad? And don't worry about the good ones, you know.
Right.
And here's how we do it at Berkeley. They had the same review. He said, you don't get enough outsiders in here to take a look at this stuff. Brought Matthew Miles in. You know, that was the last people that came in.
Was Matt in there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. He loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, the vision
Sure.
possibility catches you,
Yeah.
but the reality discourages the hell out of you.
I worked with Matt at Teachers College back in 1967,
Wow. He's probably not with us anymore.
No, I know.
Wasn't
He did the
younger.
talking typewriter, didn't he? No, that was his friend. Matt did the organizational.
He was organizational development guy.
Right. There was another guy, Omar Khayyam Moore. He was
Uh-huh.
a colleague, and he invented the talking typewriter.
I'll be done. All right.
But in that generation, though, the Rogers, Matt,
Yeah.
this kind of education experimentation was still in the air.
Was all over.
Yeah.
It was really, you know, it was the coming out of the services and the older constituency of people who'd been, you know, it was like the next wave after World War II. You know, all those veterans showed up, but they took it just the way it was handed out. And they, the GI Bill for them.
Right.
My generation, you know, they had some experience with the GI Bill. I had it all the way through all of my degrees, but you know, by then our track record built by the guys ahead of me has already been pretty well established. That you give these folks money, they pay it back. We've paid that. That was an incredible social program, I thought.
Sure was.
But you know, the adult constituency was about the only thing that is consistent. We didn't take many kids.
No, just
We had arguments about that when
Yeah.
the 29-year-old or whatever would apply, you
yeah,
know,
there was a handful of those.
handful of those. And they were usually special cases
Yeah.
that somebody was sponsoring out there somewhere. I mean, it wasn't, those unprepared people didn't find the union on their own, is what I think.
Right, right.
And then, you know, but if we, you know, stayed with that adult population, and especially with that focus on the ABD, because I thought that was a made-to-order
It was great.
clientele.
It was great because it meant that there was real colleagueship. Because
Yeah.
people were more or less at the same level. Yeah, but when you're in a colloquium where you know that there's 7 or 8 people there who really, I'm not even comfortable calling this university they're in it.
No, we had that every time. What's this person doing here? You know, and
Yeah.
so it was probably doomed earlier than I ever give it credit for. But you know what I mean? Because I was inside and couldn't see it and trying to revise it and respond to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was brought in as an outsider. You know, it's like, well, everybody else has been pretty much an insider in the operation. It was place, you know,
Yeah.
through the Antioch and other connections.
Ken wasn't, was it Ken Rossi?
No, he was brought in
From outside.
by the NCA
Yeah,
guys because of the candidacy. We couldn't sustain candidacy even.
right.
Didn't have any money in those
But
days.
that money model was really funny, the early one. Every student you get created debt.
Every
Because you
student.
owed every student a reimbursement for
Right.
study. And library access and stuff like that, so it was a quarterly, 25%.
Was it 25% of the tuition?
So every student actually had a debt to the university.
Yeah, started out, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't raise tuition. I had big arguments with Sam Baskin on raising tuition where we could afford. It wasn't a bad idea,
No.
but then you got to get it to give it.
Yeah,
I mean, where's it coming from?
yeah.
You know, I would do the modeling with John Poole. You know, I said, "Show me how this works, John." Couldn't make it work. Show it to Sam, he couldn't handle it. Didn't want to hear it.
But it's interesting when you miss those moments, like if it had gone, it was $2,500.
Yeah,
And it was for the whole degree.
yeah,
If it had gone to $2,500 a year, or if it had gone to 5,000, if it become viable at that stage, then it wouldn't have had to fold into a growth model
right.
later, because it would have been viable. Because it wasn't viable and built up debt, it had to switch to a very different financial model. And that just ran away with that. But had we built the tuition modestly higher.
Right, not a lot.
Yeah.
Just enough to hand. We're talking $2,500. Not a lot of
But it
money.
wouldn't have been bad to make that annual.
Yeah,
Until, and maybe the last year you get a reduced fee for maintenance of status.
right. Because you finished taking your courses,
Yeah.
and it would have encouraged people to take courses at other places
Yeah.
rather than the way they did it,
Right.
which was very haphazard. I thought, no.
Yeah. No, it would have been great. Well, that's what, I mean, that would have saved it. If it was 20, if they'd gone from the $2,500 for the degree to $2,500 a year at that stage, it would have been fine.
Yeah, the tuition never kept up. Sam was very reticent to raise tuition.
Yeah. Well, he believed that the foundation money was always going to be there.
Always going to come in at Ford and those folks, but
Yeah.
that didn't, you know, that was not realistic either. And they do it once, that's it, you're supposed to carry it.
Yeah, you may get a renewal, but you don't get much more than that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, the other thing I could never understand when I arrived, they'd never written the Ford Foundation final report.
Really?
And I said, how are you going to get more money from if you can't? I wrote it. I just felt we agreed to write one. Somebody's got to, what happened to that $2 billion? So I wrote it. You know, I got a nice letter back. Thanks a lot. You know, we were wondering, you know, but thank you. But that, you're never going to get another nickel out of that if you can't make that a priority. And nobody, you know, other people that had the responsibility wouldn't do it. I didn't get that. I mean, I arrived kind of, what is this place? So,
That's pretty amazing.
yeah.
It's all that dried up.
All that dried up, right, and never replaced, you know, and even Mark's effort in Washington, you know, to keep us connected to the federal establishment, didn't work for the graduate school, maybe it worked for the center, but,
Yeah, no, it didn't. You know, the model for that, I helped Mark design that model. And the model never got really developed, similar kind of off track.
right,
The idea was, because there wasn't at the time, except in Indiana, there really wasn't a university center studying philanthropy.
right at the time,
And
right.
the idea was to make that, the goal was that what better way to make the relationships in philanthropy
Yeah.
to be studying it.
Yeah,
But they never quite held that purpose.
maybe it was the base in Washington, maybe if it were here,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, get out, because that's a whole, I mean, that's a
Right.
world can suck you in, the Beltway and all that, how do you do philanthropy from there? You can do politics from there.
Right. And you can feel important because you're invited to all the meetings.
Yeah, but that's not gonna get you anything.
No.
But, you know, where's the foundation? It's in New York, isn't it?
For the most part, it's all here.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Here in Seattle.
See, oh yeah, well, that's where the money. And that other guy, who gave him his Gates and,
Buffett.
yeah, Moffett got their, Buffett got all the money together. All right,
Yeah.
well, it is not easy to figure out what went wrong. You know, there are points of view, and there's correctables, you know, where and when they could have because the things that fail, I mean, anything on colleges failed,
Yeah.
for God's sakes. You know, and you don't see the major universities failing, they're not going to be allowed to fail. So
No.
it's hard to find where the innovation going to come
Well,
from.
when you have a purpose-driven institution, beyond, you know, purpose that's particular and different from just we're providing higher education.
Yeah,
You need a leader that really gets it.
right.
Bill Birnbaum didn't get that for Antioch.
No,
They got somebody who, you know, ran a pretty decent institution and had a particular view, but it wasn't an Antioch.
no.
So he was at odds with the faculty in minutes. So I think, I mean, if I look back on it, it was only a matter of time when the institutional agenda became dominant and the growth drive became paramount,
Right,
that we would have to leave it. Because it would, even if it had succeeded in those terms, it wouldn't have been the institution we were interested in.
right.
And because it was failing, it was never clear that you had to make that choice. But had it been a successful effort to build a new institution, it wouldn't have been the institution we wanted.
That's a very good point. That really is, Colin. If it had worked, it wasn't what we wanted.
Right.
Yeah. For me, it was the day that I drove up to that building in wherever it was, and the three flags were out there, wherever they were, and they had named it the Robert Conway Academic Center. And, you know, that is so far afield from anything we need or has any positive thing to do with higher education.
Yeah. It's not even a fundraising gesture.
But the fundraising was a mess.
So if you're going to name your building after somebody, find a donor.
Yeah, who's got a more, come on. All the money spent on fundraising. I couldn't see either. You know, I've read the board minutes on it. They never raised any money.
They were incompetent. Kate, was it Kate who did the
And,
fundraising?
yeah, Kate Fenton.
She had no idea.
No.
Nice lady, but she had no idea.
Guy after guy. All the people that, you know, Conley was there for a long time, hired people that, you know, Rodriguez, that guy. No, I mean, on and on. People incompetent for the job.
Yeah.
So, didn't raise it. It cost the institution a lot of money.
Yeah, because they've never really raised any serious money for foundations after the first round.
No, I don't think they got much at all from anybody.
And nothing from the Office of Education.
No, nothing again. Nobody kept up. You know, you got to keep up the
Yeah.
contacts. It works, hard work.
Yeah, it is. It's a real job.
Hmm. Boy, it's depressing, but thanks. That was my career. But I don't mind. I mean, that's the luck of the draw. You know, nobody knows in the beginning. And
Well, we're not talking.
chance of a lifetime for me.
Yeah,
You know.
we're not talking about what in the micro edges we learned from it, got from it, people we worked with. It was,
Wonderful.
yeah, so lots of positive results.
Many.
Yeah.
No. It's very, the chance of a lifetime for me. I could have stayed in Wisconsin and I would never, you know, I'd been, you know, fine maybe, but I would never have had the exciting life that I had in academia, you know, trying to shepherd this thing through all the shoals of one disaster after another.
Yeah.
So,
And then there's the other, you know, probably 7 or 8 students who really made a serious contribution
yeah.
that might not have done it in a traditional institution.
Right, I've been trying to identify really outstanding learners. We're going to have a learner thing, but real examples like, you know, this Bernie Krause guy who just gave a lecture the other day at the California Academy of Sciences on, you know, sounds in the environment, you know, and all. Terrific. He's a sound engineer guy with it. That's the kind of, you know, he could never have done that kind of work in a regular place. Those are terrific examples.
And at the time, you know, Diane Conley could have done the acupuncture stuff.
No way.
There would be no, now she could, but there wouldn't have been any place then.
You know, Sabre put in a program on health and medicine, and they got to use the word medicine. which is, AMA
Yeah.
guards that word. Because I went to that meeting where, for the acupuncturist people to get the Oriental medicine
Right.
acceptable as an okay known argument. And that, we had a long conversation about that in their offices in Chicago. But you can call it health, any of it. The one word you got to stay away from is medicine. I said, that's kind of a problem because it's called the OMND, traditional Oriental medicine. And the guy says, it's a problem, but with that traditional and Oriental, it's not a real big problem. I said, good, I'm happy with that. And yet they made, that was the fun part of, the union could have been a lot more active in like making deals like that with the AMA where they were not, they said, look, we're not going to say we're for traditional Oriental medicine. But as a result of this meeting, we're not going to issue, if you guys play right, we're not going to issue a word against the development of this field. That's all we wanted. Don't put them down,
Right.
And they went off and did their own thing, and they're fine. And
Yeah, they're great.
they're very strong, Now they're accepted by the medical establishment, They did it right. Started out there, I think, down there in Maryland
Yeah.
with those folks. They were smart,
Yeah, they're
good
now,
people.
they're a partnership with Hopkins.
Yeah. So it can be done, even around conservative institutions or organizations like the AMA.
Right.
And I learned that, but it really takes smart people making smart decisions and not out of their pure self-interest. I mean, it showed up again and again in the union, where individual self-interest overrode any kind of, responsible institutional interest and
Yeah,
contribution.
so it got to a point where they're characterized it.
Yeah, it's true.
Right, the details.
I put stuff in there, I don't know if I'll leave it in there, but, like Roy Persons, all that mess with him and the learners, I mean, those are terrible things, but they happen. I'm not making it up.
Right.
It's all right out of the paperwork, and Marvin, oh my God, Marvin was here. He's coming back November 4th.
Here in New York?
Yeah, to have his operation. He's going to have robotic prostate cancer operation.
Really?
Done by robotics. He asked me about it, and I said, well, I did radiation, but I said, I'm going to be okay. I said, you want to hope you don't get a power failure, but other than that, but Ken Waller and I were talking about Marvin because he was symbolic of what was going on with the institution and not the best part of it. Like when I call him and he's supposed to be in Washington, he's skiing in Colorado. I mean, come on, what's going on? And it was,
He had business deals with students.
oh my God, I read the whole case file on him because somebody sent it to me. Susan Anderson sent me all of her stuff. And in there was the whole thing about, the deals that Marvin made with the Israeli learners over there. Oh, it was shameful.
And there was the guy with the Christian Brothers guy.
Oh yeah, father or brother up in wherever,
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah, we started out here in New York.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, there were lots of deals.
Lots of deals, And I'm not against deals, but they got to be reasonable and they can't be self-serving. They got to be somehow contributing to the advancement of the institution, and that's what I couldn't see in a lot of the deals that were made.
Right.
I just could not see how it would work.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there were no demands. I mean, Elizabeth was speaking all over the place, but she didn't do it as a faculty member of the union.
No, other places, right. People published their papers, didn't put the union down. It was amazing. They were ambivalent. All that reflects is their ambivalence about what they were doing with this institution.
Yeah, because they weren't, the leadership, even John didn't get the need to have an alliance with traditional institutions.
No, he had a chip on the shoulder about the traditional.
Yeah.
Whatever they'd done to him,
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you're going to build legitimacy, you've got to find a way to connect to where it's legitimate. Because they're going to, in the end, determine whether you're legitimate or not.
They got the call on that, not us.
Yes, but like what you did with the AMA, you've got to find a room.
Right. How can we kind of here's what we're going, how can we work this out, blah, 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 No, we never did that. We never joined like the Council of Graduate Schools. if you're gonna try to influence American graduate education,
Yeah.
nobody John would let me join in. You know, for that, I said, I want an interview, I got that. What do I want that for? I want an institutional membership.
Right. Right.
Sam, no. I said, how can you, that's our constituency. We're not a research university, we're not this, what are we? We're graduate school, that's the place. They invited us to speak, remember John Poole gave an address in Hawaii somewhere. You know, it was well attended, I was there, in the graduate school. Lots of people were interested. No follow-up.
No. I talked to Bob once about if you're not going to be part of the accreditation, the legitimacy of the institutions that control accreditation, then you need to create a new consortium of like-minded institutions around which you create your own membership group. So the Council of Humane Education.
Right.
Create something that the union's at the center of.
Right.
But you've got to broaden, you've got to have kind of pools of water spiraling.
They tried to do that. Remember they had Mustakas out there trying to set up a new licensing of,
Oh, yeah.
remember? That was focused on an area, but we needed that at the higher educational level
Totally.
to find our colleagues.
Yeah.
You know, and outside the U, if we'd have hooked up at the early days with the, Open University, they were interested in what we were trying to do, but
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that.
Right. Even if it began as an annual conference.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Sponsored by the union.
Yeah.
We would have had Carl Rogers there, we had Goodwin
Yeah.
there. It would have brought in all kinds of people.
I don't know why they never did any of that. The things they did were unrelated. The conferences they ran were unrelated.
Yeah, there was nothing major, and no major conference.
I don't think it ever had one.
No, I don't think so. It's very unimaginative leadership. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon that this huge experiment with by and large unimaginative leadership.
Right. And for that, I put it on the board.
Oh yeah.
They make the choice.
Really incompetent board.
Incompetent board. And I think that, they were milking the place for ideas, if there were any that they liked. But they weren't going to allow this institution to, come above the lowest of that crowd. And my God,
It's pretty low.
it's low. We didn't have a chance given that board.
Terrible board.
Would never fill out the board because that would have changed the composition and the deal, kept it at the very minimum. All those strategies.
Yeah. And the board was a real failure. And Bob, the goal was to control it, to have a board he could control.
Right. Absolutely. So.
It's an interesting lesson. I don't know what it takes to learn it, but my board here, for example, is as an executive, you want to be the decision maker.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean controlling the board. It means being a diplomat with the board. It means being able to negotiate and know where you're going.
Right.
They don't know where they're going institutionally because they come in periodically.
Right.
So you provide that focus.
Right.
But it's not that you want to control it. Once you're in that control mode, you've got to basically always be defensive.
And a person knows when they're being controlled. I mean, then you can't help that.
Right. Right.
No,
Once you're in a defensive mode, you can't be creative.
That's true.
'Cause you're
I think
protected.
they're always out there going to get the next
Yeah.
hard knock. Knew it was coming. All right, let's quit. I may be back.
Great.
You don't care. I mean,
I'm happy to do it.
just for fun.
Anytime, yeah.
I'm trying to sort this out. It's important. Thanks a million.
Pleasure.
Doody doo doo doo.
I'm just going to go see what Nubia